Awesome. Thank you, Christina. Hey, everybody. Welcome, and thanks for joining us here today. So as Christina said, I lead our implementation and onboarding team here at Forma AI, and I'm excited to share the stage today with these comp experts. So before we get into the session and the discussion, I'll have them each do just a quick introduction, because then we'll get into some more. We'll talk a lot about career experiences and such throughout the session today. So if we could we just get a quick intro? Maybe Meredith, we'll start with you and then go to Juan and close with Lisa and move it on from there. Thank you.
Sure. Hi, my name is Meredith Noyes. I'm the Director of Sales Compensation at Autodesk. Autodesk is a design and make. We make software for design and makers. So I have been at Autodesk for 15 years and have been doing sales compensation in one form or another for that entire 15 years. And prior to that, I did sales compensation at Siebel Systems and Informix. So I also have a background in teaching. I taught high school science for about 5 years. So yeah, I have an interesting background probably.
Yeah, awesome. Very unique perspective for sure. Okay, Juan, you want to go ahead and do a quick intro here?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. My name is Juan Mejia. I'm Senior Director or Global Sales Comp and Operations here at UiPath. I've been with the company for nearly 5 years and in the comp space for about 20, just age myself. My background is rather diverse in the sense that I've been in many industries, banking, broadcasting, tech, and I think that, actually global publishing, and that allows me the opportunity to see things through a different lens. I have a little bit of accounting background. I have actually dual bachelors, one in accounting and another one in business management and finance. And I'm looking forward to share some of the things that I have done through my career with all of you today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Juan. Yeah, Lisa, we'll go to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Black. I am with 3M Company. I have been there for 26 years. I did a stint in between of entrepreneurship. I had my own company for 9 years, focused on business consulting, mainly accounting, as I have an accounting background, accounting degree, and a master's in business administration. I've held various positions at 3M, from accounting to auditing, and then to sales comp. So I've been working with sales comp for the last 10 years. So excited to share with this group about career development and opportunities.
Excellent. Thanks, Lisa. Okay, so thanks for the intros, and we'll go into a little bit of just setting the stage here. So wanted to first, all of you have quite a bit of experience in this space. Pick your brains a little bit on, what have you seen change with respect to running sales comp through the course of your experience working in this space. And if anybody wants to go ahead, I guess everybody's on mute, so you could just come off mute. Might be easiest, or I can moderate you through either way. All right, Meredith.
Sure. Probably just, the changes that we've all sort of experienced. I don't think what I'm thinking about is unique to sales comp necessarily. It's, going from perpetual licensing to subscription to cloud. Now the focus seems to be more and more on consumption. Certainly from just within like the commission or sales comp world, we've definitely seen improvements in, automation and tools that we can use. There's a much more heightened focus on data and upstream data, and oftentimes that's also corporate data. So we're sharing common data sets with other users in the organization. So that drives a lot more collaboration and the need for clean data and processes. So yeah, I think the automation and then just the business model changes and trying to keep up with those, the sales comp plan obviously has to keep pace with those business model changes.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. So I can actually piggyback from what Meredith said. From my perspective, there's a greater appetite for kind of like automation, as you have actually said it. streamlining processes, simplification of stuff. And I think often enough, when we're talking about commissions, there is the misconception is, hey, we're calculating how someone gets paid. And there's more to it, to be honest with you. So I think from throughout the course of the few years in my career, it's been about like evolving the function to kind of like brand it correctly, understanding that it's just not the end result of processes upstream. It is understanding what a company wants to do. Often enough, comp tends to be the tail end of everything that you do in the company, but it's actually one of the areas that becomes rather crucial, right? Because sellers are generating revenue, right? It ties back to what we want sellers to do, therefore achieving financial objectives. So I think from my perspective, my career has evolved a lot around that. And, trends of like appetite for simplifying and automating as much as possible so that, humans, can actually focus on, delivering more business outcome results and providing more of an expertise to leadership around how to navigate through complex conversations. So I think from my angle, that's what I have seen.
Yeah,
and
awesome.
I would just
Thank
add
you.
from my perspective, what I've seen really is not necessarily changes to sales comp, but the ability to be flexible to accommodate changes that are happening in the businesses. We have big macroeconomic changes over the last 3 years, starting with the pandemic and supply chain constraints and geopolitical issues, conflicts going on. There's a lot of things happening. And we, at least at 3M, have been in the approach of annual cycles of sales incentive. And there's so many changes happening throughout the year. We need to be more flexible. And that has been a challenge, to be flexible. I think one of the other big things that I've seen change in this space is the companies that are out there, like Forma AI, that provide a service in the sales performance management space versus companies building their own internal support for that service. And I think that's a huge shift and will continue to shift in this space.
Yeah, totally agree with what Lisa just said. Absolutely. The solutions that are out there to help folks like us, do our jobs has really, really changed over the last 20 years.
Awesome. So we'll tie this to the next question, but just a couple of things before we move on. I really like the fact, I think Juan, you said it, might have been Meredith, the objective function hasn't changed. It's optimizing sales performance, but there are a few themes around flexibility, being able to work with data, more collaborative environments, the drive to simplification, more automation, all of these things. Totally agree. Like things that have changed, if we look over a couple of decades in this space, they've changed dramatically, right, over that period of time, the expectations. So very, obviously very relevant to the topic here of the skills and such that you need to evolve in this space. So kind of in the same note, so if you look at each of your kind of trajectories and arcs in your careers, if you broke them down into a few chapters, and maybe it overlays a little bit with those things we just touched on that have been changing. Could you just kind of talk us through if you talk about how you've progressed, what those chapters might have looked like for you?
I can start because when I moved to California, my sister actually she was a recruiter, and she asked me, or she said, hey, I have two options for you. One is in event planning and the other one is commissions. And I was like, oh, I have a science background, so I'll do the commission thing. That's a little more math related or something. But I was fresh out of college at this point. So I did that commission and work for maybe 4 or 5 years. And it was, for me at that point, it was just a job. And then I went back to school to get my master's in education. And that's when I did this. I started teaching high school. And I only taught high school for, again, about 5 years, because then I had kids and everything changed. And when I came back, so after having children, I decided to come back into the corporate world. And I remember very clearly coming back into this sales compensation world, after this 5 or 6 years being in high school, basically. And I remember so clearly how much the technology had changed. And, you know, when you're a high school teacher in a public school, the technology that you have exposure to is just not the same as what corporate America has to offer. And so I just remember being totally shocked at going from, like, I think prior to teaching, it was just what's on your desktop. And then by the time I came back to corporate America, everything was like in the cloud. And, you know, we had chat sessions and we had Zoom meetings and we had all this stuff that was completely new to me and foreign to me. And so I wanted to tell that story because it's one of those things like we're kind of like where if you haven't seen a kid for 3 years and then you suddenly see them and you're like, oh my God, they're so tall. It was very noticeable to me having that 5-year hiatus in the public schools and being out of corporate America. It was very noticeable how much things had changed. And so that's kind of how I view the chapters. For me, it was like I had the job, I had the teaching career, and then I had the sales compensation career, which was really more elevated at that point when I came back.
Yeah. And a technology shift for sure.
Yeah.
I can actually resonate with a lot of the things that Meredith said. Well, not in the sense of like being a teacher, but more in the sense of like, I was born in Colombia. I moved from Colombia after I finished school. So I graduated there from accounting. And when I moved here, I saw the necessity to like, hey, what else do I want to do? So, I obviously got a job doing everything related with accounting. I was basically doing everything from ABC, and it was a smaller company. But I started getting a little bit involved with sales comp, kind of like how the sellers in the small company are dealing with, like, kind of analytics. So I was doing a lot of stuff. So that's how I was introduced to kind of like the world. So I went from a small company doing a bunch of other stuff to kind of like being more in a niche environment. So for me, the stages was a little bit of like doing a bunch of stuff to gradually emerge into a specific area. So I went into more like kind of like an admin role, getting to know the basics of what the role entitled. It was a great opportunity to realize that I was used to multitask and doing more than I needed to do. And for me was that, hey, this is great. I'm doing my job. I'm learning the A, B's, and C's and, getting the road of what I need to do tomorrow. But it's really not going to get me to where I see myself in the future, which is probably going back into, and potentially going into a manager role and the whole thing. So I did a little bit of a 360 kind of turn, because I went into a company, mid-sized company that I was doing my job in like 2 weeks and asking to do more, to a company where I was working from 7 until 9, 10 p.m. And there was not sufficient hours for all the work that I needed to do. So I think is like, as you go through your career, you need to think about how to drive the right balance and also do it at the right time, right? Don't go from 0 to 60 in 2 seconds, because you actually need to gradually grow. It's like, I try to do too much all at once, and that didn't end up, working to my advantage in the terms of like work-life balance, right? It was great in the sense of like, I got all the skill sets, the backbone that I needed to build, having the ability to push back when I needed to push back and make my case when I needed to make my case. So that was actually what put me into my next role, which was more of a global scale, right? So my recommendation is, as you go through the stages, look at learning the basics, learning the systems. It's really important when you are in this arena that you have the ability to incorporate technology into everything that you bring to the table. As Meredith said, is she went from high school to everything that she was teaching to actually now into the other world, and she saw that a lot of changes have emerged. So I think it is how you combine all those. So my stages went from like learning the basics to incorporate technology into whatever I did on my day to day, to being a little bit more analytical driven towards what the company wanted to see, and then jumping into design, right? Jumping from design into a mid-sized company to a global scale has helped me excel in everything, because you get to learn and interact with a different environment, whatever you are. So I think that has been part of the success. But I guess I went through the stages inorganically or organically of like learning the basics and jumping back and forth between those, and then finally get into a sustainable growth in my career, where I actually went through everything that I needed to learn. And then the last piece was basically the design portion, and then basically how to present that at a C-level scale, right? So I think from my point of view, that's kind of like the stages: basics, analytics, systems, get into a design stage, and then basically just being able to cascade all those areas into a C-level kind of conversation. So
yeah, makes sense. Kind of understand the underpinnings and all the different pieces. And then the more strategic side, when you're talking about design, I presume plan design and more of the behavior you want to drive and such, and working with sales leadership, and then up to the C-level and expanding into the more global world. But yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Correct.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, Lisa, give us some
All
thoughts
right,
on
I would say,
yeah.
yeah, it's an interesting topic, and a different way to reflect on it is, chapters. I would say each chapter in my career represents a different stage in growth. It's marked by challenges also, both personally and professionally, as we grow in life, have families. Those challenges also bring different things to your work life. But I would say the first chapter was launch. You start your career, you're in entry-level positions, you're learning, you're moving into different entry-level positions, trying to find more of what is really your interest and where you want to work longer term. And then I think the second stage for me was advancement, trying different areas of expertise in the finance space. And then I did a pivot, like Meredith was talking about as far as teaching. I did a pivot, started my own company. My kids were small, and I needed to be able to be home more. And it was a great opportunity for me to pivot, to start my own company. I learned a lot, and I decided after 9 years of being an entrepreneur, I wanted to go back to 3M. So I pivoted back to 3M. And like Meredith and Juan were saying, I was shocked at the change in data that was available in that 9-year span. I was just amazed at the difference going back to 3M. And so I think the next stage for me was more of a leadership management stage or chapter of where do I want to focus on? What opportunities does 3M offer? Which there's many different positions you could drive in a company like 3M. And then I think the stage I'm in right now is specialization, right? For working on SIP for 10 years. I have an accounting degree. I didn't ever think I'd be in the SIP, sales incentive compensation space, but it's a really interesting area to focus on and specialize in. There's always changing opportunities and exceptions or requests that comes in from the business. So it's an exciting space to be in. And I think the final chapter, which I don't know what that will be yet, but what I'm hearing from others is more reflective and legacy. What has been your career? What do you want to do in the last, maybe 5 to 10 years of your career? What do you want to give back to the community? What do you want to give back to the businesses that you're supporting? More of a reflection and, brand reputation. But there's so many different things we could all do, and how you make those choices. I think it's important to be open to different opportunities and different things as those experiences present themselves. So
Excellent.
That's my chapters.
I like the reflective towards the later part, of course. Okay, I was going to move on to the next section, but just before I do that, I think we'll have a little time at the end for Q&A, but I did want to I was kind of monitoring the panel here, ask this question because it's so closely related to what you just touched on. So the question was, has where you've sat in each org affected your career growth? Person says they bounced around from ops and HR, taking a little bit out of what was said. Definitely the way you described it, Juan, is kind of getting those points of experience, I think would be important. But maybe can anybody talk just a little bit about, moving around and I guess I'm reading into the question a little bit, like how important is it to get that broader functional experience before you push to move up within this domain of sales ops?
Yeah, I think it's important to get different experiences. I mean, like I mentioned, I have an accounting background, but I've spent time in cost accounting. I've spent time in auditing. I've spent time in sourcing or procurement. I've spent time in different leadership roles over different stakeholder groups. And I think sales incentive and comp in general is a lot of HR skills as well. I mean, you're talking about people's compensation. It's a highly emotionally charged topic. So being able to navigate that with a calm demeanor, keeping the emotion out of it, and really listening to the concerns that are being raised, all those skills are developed through different experiences.
I will probably agree with a lot of the things that you said. I think is you're building your emotional intelligence. Now, going back to the question in terms of like where the function sits, I think it really is up to you in terms of like what are the things that you want to specialize, or do you want to be a little bit more broad, or do you want to just acquire a little bit of everything, right? I seen the function being run from the people ops perspective, revenue ops and strategy, finance. I think independently of where the function sits, that's a limit the ability to learn, because the function could be pretty similar when you look at it, right? Unless you really purely concentrate on like anything related with service that is a little bit more geared towards kind of like HR, right? When you look at sales comp and compensations holistically, you have to look at everything that it does. It's basically the administration piece, the integration of systems, the communication with people, the design portion, the strategy. So there's a lot of areas. So I think as I find the areas that you actually want to build upon, will be my recommendation, and then take it from there. Success is there for everybody, and I think it's just finding someone along the way that can give you the opportunity to succeed. Also, is upon yourself to kind of like show and demonstrate that you're ready for the next role, and you're ready to kind of like take it to the next level. So opportunities present themselves anywhere where you sat. I don't think they're limited to what you are sitting within the org. I think there are limit of how much you want to grow within each company, and how much the company wants to provide you that ability for growth.
Yep. Good point.
Yeah, I would just quickly add on. I think the most important thing is to have really good relationships with all of those functional groups or areas. So like I sit in sales, but the relationships that I have with the folks in finance and HR and legal are crucial, right, to the success of the incentive program. You have to understand your stakeholders and what they're concerned about, and so you can compromise and collaborate with those groups and serve them. So even if you don't move around, as long as you have an appreciation for what those groups are most interested in, that goes a long way.
Okay, excellent. So like the inputs, I like the comment about finding somebody. If you are moving around, you find somebody who can help you succeed. That's, I think, important anywhere, any kind of role you're working in and professionally. We were going to move to skills, but I do want to take this next question because it's just really close to what we've touched on. And we may not have the experience here. I don't know everybody's background, but the question was, which forums have been the most helpful in your career growth? Not 100% sure what that one's getting at, but maybe domains. But then the next part, I wanted to just ask you all, has anyone had a change in geographies? It would be great to hear that perspective. I presume we're talking about like more of a global change where you really had to move from one kind of cultural environment to the other. I don't know if we have that on the team, but I wanted to ask that question from the audience here.
Having had the opportunity, I mean, I lived in other parts of the world, but not necessarily because of work driven. It was more like, I moved here to Colombia. I did some programs abroad in Barcelona, and I did some stuff in Beijing. So that's actually great. I think that's what gave me the kind of like 3D view. I'm like, hey, I like the multicultural environment, and I think being in a global role is what I want to do, right? So I think that's what I took towards the past 10 years. I've been big and focusing on making sure that my role is global because I enjoy that part of the equation.
Awesome.
And I haven't lived in different countries, but my role has been global since 2017. And we did a lot of traveling. And I love the opportunity to work with our global colleagues. You learn so much culturally, and there's very different laws and legal requirements, works councils in Europe, different things that we need to navigate around sales incentive or sales compensation. And I've learned a lot from a global perspective, and it's been invaluable from a personal development and I think career growth as well.
Totally agree.
Lots to learn, right? In other cultures.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, well, we can jump. I'm kind of watching the timer too. I want to make sure we get through our kind of core items we had to discuss. So the next series is really about skills. So, let's kind of start with the more junior level. We kind of touched on this a little bit, but if somebody were looking to get promoted from an analyst, frontline individual contributor role to that first line manager in the space that we work in sales comp, sales operations, any suggestions that you would have just based on current state and what you've seen? We can go. Whoever would like to go first? Maybe Meredith, I can call on you since
Sure.
you had that one. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, I think it's similar. I think the skills needed to progress up in the organization are probably similar across all roles, right? Like you have to have an awareness. You have to have the competencies to move up. I think what's unique about sales compensation is this, to me, it's really about having an appreciation for sales and what they bring to what they do for the organization, what their role is. This is my personal take is, and it's, by the way, it's why I got into sales compensation, because my dad was in sales. And, when I was in college, I sort of was his office manager, but I had all this exposure to this like sales and the culture, the process, this idea of persuasion and paying for persuasion. And so I feel like there has to be that appreciation. There are a lot of like stereotypes and quips people make about salespeople and stuff. And some of that's like, haha and jest, but I think really to be successful, you have to have an appreciation for what salespeople bring to the table and be willing to put in the thinking behind either supporting them, like you're supporting them on the commission payment side of it, or you're supporting them on the plan and programmatic side of it. But either way, that's your primary stakeholder, in my opinion. And so you need to have an appreciation for what they do for your organization.
Thank you, Mary. That was great. From my perspective, I think is pretty straightforward. You need to be able to position yourself in a situation where you come across as being the SME, right? So, people, and this is all about trust, right? People trust who has the knowledge. If you are in an analyst role and you're, comfortable on doing the same A, B's, and C's, that's okay, right? That's your job. But I think it's demonstrating that you want to do more in the sense of like, hey, I'm kind of like streamlining a process, and sometimes adding more headcount to the issue doesn't necessarily fix the issue. Proposing new ideas about how to tackle a problem that you're dealing with. So for me, that has been crucial. I think in between going in between like layers of management, just demonstrate that I'm relevant, build your brand. Demonstrate that you have the ability to streamline, probably absorb more responsibilities. And I think with time, as you go from level to level, is you cannot do everything. So you need to build a team that you can rely on, and it becomes about delegation, right? Nobody gets promoted for working hard. I think people get promoted because they demonstrate they have the ability to work well with others. They are relevant. They built a good brand. They have become an SME, and they're able to delegate, right? Let's be realistic. If you're supporting an organization that has 2,000 people, there's no way that you're going to be able to do the A, B's, and C's by yourself. So it's building a team that you entrust and the leadership knows that you are that person that you can go to for resolving some of those issues that you actually are facing on a day-to-day. So that would probably be it for me.
And I agree with both Meredith and Juan on the comments they've made. I think the only thing I could add to that is, from a manager perspective in this space, I think it's important to have strong communication skills balanced with compliance and audit perspective as it relates to sales incentive, because managers in the business and sales leadership will push back on sales incentive related issues, and being able to balance those discussions to support your analyst, to support the process, to support the business requires some strong persuasive communication skills. So I think that's the only thing I would add to that.
Okay, awesome. And then to wrap on this topic of like looking at the analyst kind of first line level, is there anything that you would say that we haven't talked about already that's kind of an immeasurable skill that great comp analysts tend to have that you've worked with, who you've seen move up in your careers?
I would say from my perspective, the one immeasurable skill that I think is really valuable is, I've coined it professional skepticism. So it's digging in a little bit deeper to some of the topics as they arise, so that you have all the facts that you can on the topic to be able to address the business and leadership. Professional skepticism.
I love that, Lisa. I gotta write. I was looking for the heart emoji. That's a great one. I love that. I have calm efficiency written on my Post-it note, but I'm going to add professional skepticism. That's really great. I think sort of along the same lines that Lisa has mentioned, it's you really have to have this multifaceted, like you have to have an appreciation and understanding of finance, understanding of sales, understanding of legal. So it's really this like cross-sectional role, which is what makes it so interesting and fun, because or maybe fun, but like also challenging, right? Because you're constantly having to work with many different parts of the organization. And then to Juan's point, that becomes its own niche, but it's a very cross-functional niche. So you really have to kind of have that overarching or have all those different skill sets to some degree.
I think from my point of view, I think it's pretty similar to what you said, Lisa, just framed differently in the sense that you have to be inquisitive, right? You have to know the why of everything. And I always tell my team, there's no stupid question, right? If you are asking, it's because in your head it's not clear, right? So I think if you are inquisitive and you always know the why of everything, I think that gets you to a point where you're able to understand. I mean, if you're asking the same question more than once, that's just not being inquisitive. That's just not paying attention. But that's besides the point. I think from my point of view is ask as many questions as you need to. That will allow you to comprehend the process from end to end. And I think is, as Meredith said, you built a niche around comp, but this is not just an area where you just interact about, calculations for comp. It's basically policies, controls, you talk to people, people ops in the terms of like, anything related with how they get compensated, how the benchmark occurs. You talk to, strategy and operations in terms of how the quotas are built, the territory. So there's actually a vast majority of a lot of stuff that you could learn and, that you could actually expand on. So yes, I think it's the same thing that you ladies say, but it's stated differently.
Yeah, if I'd summarize it, it's just knowing a lot about a lot of things that affect comp, because it spans from HR, organizational things, to data, to what motivates a sales team. And there's a lot to know around all these various areas. And the more informed and skilled you are, the more you're going to tend to move up. So taking it to kind of the next level, thinking about sort of a career progression. So if somebody has made it from that first line contributor to manager, managing a team, let's say, at the next level up, we're managing a larger team, potentially a manager of managers. Are there any thoughts that any of you have on, what does that skill set look like? What really maybe captures what enables somebody to make that leap in their career?
think you have to be able to synthesize and provide data in a more concise fashion, right? Often enough, people have the tendency to be immersed into the details of comm, right? And that's great because that means you get it. That means you understand the why and how. But I think is if you want to go to the next level, you have to put it in plain terms, right? As some people will say, just put it in English, right? And it's just this: the simpler that it becomes, the more adaptable that it is, and the more the better you're building your brand, and people understand that you're able to put things at C-level, right? Let's be honest. When you talk into C-level, sending a whole paragraph with calculations and tables is not going to get you anywhere. They want to get it like this. What is it that you're telling me, and tell it to me in a few words so that I can read the first sentence and I know what I'm actually looking at. So that to me is crucial. Be able to synthesize and keep it simple.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think what helps do that is also, we were talking just a few minutes ago about like you have all these different areas that you need to be proficient at. And as you move up in the organization, it becomes more political. You need to be able to influence more. And you need, I think, in order to really be effective, it's important to sort of stay grounded on what either your personal principles are, but really more around like your programmatic principles. What are your foundational, what are the fundamental aspects of your plan so that you're grounded in the ability to make decisions, make recommendations, right? So you need some stability in your program and some robustness, because I feel like as you move up in the organization, you're going to face more headwinds, right? So you got to be able to weather the storm a little bit.
Excellent.
Yep,
Lisa?
I agree with both things that you said. And I think the thing that I would add is, as you go from analyst, manager to director, the scope of your responsibilities is broader. You have a bigger umbrella of responsibility. You have to navigate ambiguity a little bit more. You don't have clear day-to-day tasks. It's a little bit different every day. And I think the other thing about that is being comfortable being away from the details, because you're leading versus doing. So you have to be dependent on your teams to really know the day-to-day details and to be able to address those questions. So building out your team, having them have the right level of accountability, and we call here at 3M RACIs. Everyone has a RACI of what they're responsible, accountable, consultative, and informed about. So those are some key things as a director to manage through. And I think navigating ambiguity is one of the biggest ones from my experience. Is, as a director, it's very different than an analyst or manager. It's fun. There's a lot of different components from an influential perspective. And I liked your comment, Meredith, about weathering the storm, because sometimes the storms can be pretty crazy.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. I really like the when the comment was made about, the C-suite is not going to read your multiple paragraph tables of data. There was a strong physical acknowledgement and agreement on that one. So I suspect there may be some experience in that domain over the years between the group here. So sticking on the same topic, though, just for a few more minutes here on kind of moving from the manager into the kind of leader of leaders role. Is there anything in your own careers that you experienced that you might want to talk about that was good, professional experience for you to share with the group here around making, and when you made that transition and some lessons learned?
I can start. For me, I think it's something that when we were actually having the original conversation, the initial conversation about connecting and being part of this great fabulous event, you have to be able to be your best advocate. And what that means is if you're really not clear, or you really are not cascading that message over to whoever you are reporting to, around, what you want to do and where you see yourself, that kind of like holds you back a little bit, even that you have all the checkboxes to move into the next level. So for me was, at the beginning stages of my career, I was focusing on working hard. And I think working hard is just part of the equation. I think it's a given. I think it was, how do I emerge from being, just working hard to actually working more strategically and positioning myself and, kind of like being like that SME and brand myself. So for me, that was one of the, I would probably say, I wouldn't say growing pains, but a little bit some of the things that I learned through my career. Be your best advocate, be straightforward about the things that you want to do. Obviously, it doesn't hurt if you find someone along the way that supports you. Kind of like piggyback to a lot of the things that we have said here is that, if you find someone that you can partner up and they actually are vested in your success, leverage that to the best degree. But for me, that was one of the kind of like learning curves, right? It's not working hard. It's how you work more strategically and how you demonstrate that and how you build your brand and how you actually show that you can actually do that in a better way.
I remember some advice. So what both Lisa and Juan have said have reminded me of two things, little nuggets of advice that I got years ago. One was to truly get comfortable with ambiguity. It's navigating it. It's being comfortable with it. You're not always going to get a quick, straight answer, or it's not going to be a clean solution. Things take time, right? So that ambiguity is something that I found myself just really uncomfortable with. I was like a problem solver. I wanted to fix everything right away. And it was like, okay, as you move up, I don't know, things take longer because you're dealing with bigger problems that are more strategic in nature. So that was one. And the other tip I got from somebody a long time ago was, instead of managing a to-do list, it was manage, like literally wake up in the morning and think about, who do I need to think about today? Who are the people? Who are my important stakeholders and what are they thinking about? And that can help determine sort of how you prioritize your time and your energy. It's just like Juan said, like starting to think more strategically and using your time more strategically. I think relationships, especially now when everybody's at home on Zoom, I mean, that's how it is for us now. It's so hard to forget about build relationships. It's hard to even maintain them now. And it's so important to do that. So any opportunity that you get to have in-office events, to travel, to meet with salespeople, finance people, HR people in person, it really does go a long way into building your success.
Yeah, I would reinforce that, Meredith. One of the things I was going to say is having a key stakeholder in each of the functions, HR, finance, auditing, legal, have those key contacts that you stay connected to through one-on-ones or other just random meetings that you need to have on a specific topic. But staying up to date with what's happening in those other functions is a really beneficial piece of sales incentive, because I don't know about your companies, but we have other incentive programs as well that are managed by HR for non-sales employees, and it's still an incentive program. So balancing between fairness of the other incentive programs and sales incentive, it's a bit challenging at times. So working through those key stakeholders really help drive consistency in how we govern any requests for exceptions or even the overall frameworks of the process. So I think the networking, the relationship building is a key nugget of good advice.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like a couple of themes that touch on were ambiguity, and then being comfortable managing an ambiguity, and then managing the relationships, which I suspect help you as you're getting more information from a more diverse set of points of view. It helps you maybe reduce some of the ambiguity as well. Awesome. So I guess one more thing on skills, just watching the time here, a few more minutes. As we think about, we touched on this, definitely technology, how I think each of you mentioned how you observed in your career, technology advancing and changing a bit the role and how it works. As we think more current day, current state, are there any skills that you would say you think are really important for somebody getting into this space earlier in their career to make sure they're spending some time developing or finding opportunities to develop?
I would say communication skills. Is that what you were going to say, Lisa?
That was one of them. I was also going to say, understand AI with all the things that are coming in the technology space. How is AI going to impact sales incentive going forward? I think that is going to be new for all of us as we evolve through what AI means, but communication is a key one, as is technology.
Yeah, and so just to tie into that, for example, so we work with Forma, and we're working on, we're using some of their AI features, but I need to be able to go and communicate those to leadership and to the team. Like, what does this really mean? I think a lot gets lost in, people will just say AI, and you really have to be able to articulate what does that mean and what is it going to do for us, because AI can be used in so many different ways, right? So I would just say, even today, I will say something in an email that seems totally clear to me, but depending on the audience, it's interpreted in different ways. And again, we're not in person with people, and communication is becoming harder and harder because of that. So I just think build relationships, trust, so that you have a foundation for those communication. So much is lost in translation. It's just amazing to me how how that continues to happen in every organization, right? So the more you can communicate and bring clarity where there is confusion, the more helpful you will be to people.
I probably don't have anything else to add. I think it's pretty much along the same lines. Just have a clear message and have a clear brand about, what you bring to the table. I have the opportunity to have the current company I work for is basically an automation platform, right? Full automation platform. So we drink our own champagne rather often. So we leverage our own tech to kind of automate a lot of processes. So we built a lot of stuff this year that probably save us 5,000 hours of work on an annual basis, right? So I think measuring the impact of tech is not necessarily feeling like, hey, AI is going to actually outsource my job. No, it's they're freeing our time from all these tedious admin tasks so that we can actually have the ability to think through and provide practical solutions. And then, here's what we would like to do, and strategize and actually think outside the box a little bit better, right? Because you earned a little bit bandwidth. So for me, it's pretty much the same. You guys just phrase differently.
So I think one other comment or skill is agility. Flexibility. As things evolve technology-wise, our customers are buying different ways, and the pace of which they're learning about products and the services that we offer is so different than even 5 years ago. I think the pandemic changed a lot of that from a customer buying pattern and experience. So how can we maintain the skill of being flexible enough and agile, which I think is where Forma comes in, to help us be flexible enough to pay our sales teams more relevant? Because things are going to change even potentially on a quarter by quarter basis. And it's not just an annual cycle anymore. So agility, flexibility, and speed of being able to execute those changes, I think, is also critical.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, it's interesting because the rate of change, I think things are only changing faster and faster just in business in general with all the technology we have. So there's that to deal with. But then I like the point about understanding it. And then it comes back to the fundamentals of being a good communicator. That's something that hasn't changed, but it's interesting as the environment we operate in has changed. It's actually become the first thing said in this panel, which I thought was really not what I was expecting, but was interesting insight that it's critical we communicate. Okay, so let's go to, we have about 10 minutes here. I had a few more things, but we might have to cut it a little short because I want to spend, at least get to a little bit of Q&A before we wrap. But before we do that, maybe a little bit rapid fire question here. So when you look back on your career, was there an important lesson learned that you think could help somebody else advance in their own sales comp journey here? I know we touched on a lot, but if there is something you feel like we maybe missed, want to just turn over every stone here. But any really key lessons learned over the years you'd like to share?
I'd say one lesson from my perspective is be comfortable being uncomfortable. So whatever opportunities arise, take them. Be uncomfortable. You learn, you grow differently, and it helps you develop into the position and leadership level you want to get to.
I will agree with that. I think, as I said before, I think is be your best advocate in the sense of like, what do you bring to the table and how do you actually, we'll say like a little bit, showcase those skills to leadership. Be able to, to show that you can actually do more, and not more in the sense of like just working more hours, more in the sense of like more strategic work and work smartly, right? I think that's very valued by all organizations. I think often, there's a misconception that adding more resources to a problem will fix it. And I don't think that's the case. I think if you showcase that you can fix an issue without throwing resources or hours of work into the equation, that will put you into the next path to your career.
And Meredith, anything else on nuggets that we haven't touched on yet?
I think it would be a repeat of what others have already said. Yeah.
No worries at all. I do want to have a couple minutes here for the questions. Let me go over it and look. I saw a couple things came in. I know one of them was simply, you can decide how you would like to answer. Are any of you guys hiring in 2024? Start with that one.
I will.
Yes, we have an opening now at Autodesk.
Awesome.
Reach out if you're interested. The one thing I wasn't sure, Elliot, if it was going to come up later. I guess the only last thing I would add is, be humble and continue to seek feedback from everyone. There's no such thing as bad feedback. So it's a really excellent way to grow. So yeah, just that.
Yeah, great point. We hadn't really touched on that. Yeah, getting feedback. Lisa, are you going to answer the hiring question for the group? We have 2 out of 3.
I don't know if we're hiring or not.
Great sign if 2/3 of you guys have open positions. That's great to hear. Yeah, excellent. Okay, let me take a look here at the. I know another question come in. Let's see. Oh, okay. This is a little bit tactical, but we have a couple minutes. Maybe you could share just the question. I'll just read it verbatim, and then you can decide how to frame it to an answer. But what was your career progression like? And we've talked about a lot about that, but more specifically, how many years did you spend on each role before progressing to the next? I think it's just looking for a little bit of benchmarking on reasonable expectation setting. And I say frame it how you want, because I'm thinking maybe from individual contributor to people manager to larger team manager, perhaps, like however you want to frame it. But what are expectations that somebody should have around those progression cycles that you think framed in environments you've experienced?
I can start. I think from my perspective, you need to at least have 3 years of experience under your belt as an analyst, because you get the basics of the stuff before you even start considering anything else out there. I think everybody is smart in their own way, and they have the ability to absorb and do more. Not also everybody wants to be a manager, but I would probably say somewhere between 3 to 5 years to scale back into the next level. And from there forward, it's really up to you. I mean, you could really move between manager and director. If you are relevant, you bring your brand. So there's really no right or perfect equation per se. I think it's more like around once you make it to manager, you can go to the next levels, within 5 years. If you put your mind to it and you build your brand, you can actually demonstrate that you're problem solving, you can streamline, you're able to synthesize concise message, and you're able to just bring all those areas to work for the company and build good teams that can actually help you to get to the next level. So I think that's my point of view.
Very fair, Juan. Lisa, yeah, you want to go ahead?
I think the only thing I would add to that is as you progress through your career, I think the time that you spend in position is longer and longer. As an analyst, it can be, as I think Juan mentioned, 3 to 5. I'd say at 3M, it's maybe 2 to 3 that you're in those positions, and then you move to something else from an advancement perspective. But as you progress in your career, it's more of a 5 to 7 year timeline, I would say, from what I've seen.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to remember, but I think I was I was like an analyst or individual contributor for about the first 5 years, and then I was in a management and then senior management role. That was 10 years of manager level before I got to director. So it definitely it can take a while, to Lisa's point, to to accumulate the experience. I think especially in sales compensation, first of all, the roles don't always become available often, but it can take a while to get to that director level in such a niche area like sales compensation.
Awesome. Yeah, so there's variability here that just needs to be acknowledged as part of the process. Okay, I know we're just about at time. I want to respect everybody's time here. Really quick one, so I think this is interesting. It's pretty much can be a yes/no question, but I have 4+ years of experience in sales compensation. Would you recommend the CSCP, so the Certified Sales Compensation Professional certification? I don't know, does anybody here have a point of view on that, if you think that's an important thing for somebody moving up in the space?
Definitely.
Okay.
It doesn't hurt, right? I mean, and to have that on your resume definitely is valuable and helpful. It was for me. Yeah.
Awesome.
I have it. If you have the opportunity for it, go for it. I don't think it's going to be a key indicator where you see yourself in your next path in your career, to be honest with you. But if you have the bandwidth and you want to take it, doesn't hurt. That would be my advice, right?
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add to that.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Okay. So balanced perspective here, obviously can't hurt, but maybe not necessary or critical to advancement if you set things up the right way. So, hey, I know we're about at time, but wanted to say thanks, Juan, Lisa, Meredith, for joining us here, participating in the session, and thank you in the audience for the questions and participating today. So tomorrow we'll have our last day of the Comp Ops sessions about successful comp plan rollout. So we hope you can make it. Imagine that topic will be very relevant given where we are in the year and kind of running up into the end of the year and time to roll out new comp plans, right? So thanks again, everybody, for joining.
Yeah.
Thank you.